We're back on the SportsMax Zone to continue with a story that rocked the footballing world, the death of Diego Armando Maradona on this day, the 25th of November in the year 2020. Here's Donald Oliver with the details of that story, which rippled through the sporting world in the region of midday Caribbean time.
2020 has already proven to be a year to forget.
After weeks of will they or won't they and relentless pledges, it would go ahead as planned. Eventually, the COVID-19 outbreak became too big, the pressure too intense, and the IOC has buckled.
And even though it has been several hours, it is still stunning to say the words that Kobe Bryant, the legendary NBA star, is dead tonight.
Now the entire football world has been plunged into mourning following the news of the passing of Diego Armando Maradona, one of the greatest footballers to ever grace the field of play.
Yeah, Donald, what a year it's been, and we still have over a month left in the year. Our South American football correspondent, Juan Giarango, was on our UEFA Champions League broadcast earlier on Wednesday, and he spoke about the reactions in Argentina to the news of Maradona's passing.
There's so much that's been going on in terms of everything that has come out. I mean, it's scarcely 2 hours ago when the news began, and rarely do you ever see grown men cry on television? And that was what you saw as soon as you heard the news, you turned on Argentine television. You saw grown men crying about a man that, for some, is the greatest footballer ever. For others, there might be, other players that they would consider, but he's always still in that conversation. As a footballer, you can't deny what he was able to bring to the table. As a human being, sometimes, just like many of us throughout our lives have had our shortcomings and our deficiencies, but you'd go to, and I've talked with you guys about what Usain Bolt or Bob Marley have meant to Jamaican culture, and that was what Diego Maradona has meant to Argentine culture. They might have not known when you land at an airport where Argentina is, but as soon as they saw Argentina, the first thing they thought about was Maradona. So that's something that's very impactful in terms of a legacy.
Yeah, true words there from Juan Arango, and the salient point I think he made, or one of the salient points he made, would have been the fact that he was human, and even though he was a superstar and iconic and worshipped by many people, the frailties of Diego Maradona in his character were pretty much advertised to the whole world. So you connected with him as someone who, you know, had his lows and his highs and his dependencies, his weaknesses, his addictions. And when people connect with someone in a star, of a star-like status, like he, in that kind of way, there is something about the emotion that is real, because you recognize him, Mariah and Brent, as a human being subject to, you know, all the weaknesses and frailties that we all are subject to.
Definitely, Lance. And you know, many a times, and we talk about this on the show a lot when we explore footballers, many a times, you know, people forget just because, you know, these players go on the field and they do, you know, they're brilliant with their performances. Sometimes, you know, it's so easy to forget that they're simply human. And, you know, I think what Diego Maradona embodies is the fact that, you know, when other players, let's just say Neymar, for example, was going through his thing, you know, he could look back at clips, look at Diego Maradona and, you know, say, okay, he was a human as well. I can bounce back and still, you know, get back to what I see as good performance. And I feel many young footballers would do that. Look at his life story and say, you know what, I'm human too. And sometimes I just have to accept that, because, you know, the times that we're living in, even now so more than ever, it's very difficult to, you know, deal with mental issues and just personal struggles that you may be going through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and Brent, you know, it was just in the past couple of weeks, I think, that we were discussing Maradona. George was making the point that a lot of his addictions and a lot of his drug use were drug issues that dealt with performance inhibiting, not performance enhancing. And we were just toying with the idea of a Maradona taking care of himself, treating his body in the way that a professional sportsman should, just how much better he would be if he physically had prepared himself for the rigors of football, which he didn't.
I think if that was the case, guys, I don't think you would have had the adoration and love that you have for him. I think his imperfections is what made him such a superstar. As Mariah was alluding to, the fact that, you know, when he fell down, he will get back up and he will be better. This is a player that has done everything against the grain. As a young footballer growing up, your coaches tell you need to play with both feet. You need to learn to play the sport with both feet. But Maradona was a one-footed player, very one-footed player, left-footed player.
Yeah.
And he dominated because you just felt he was that superhero that will come out from retirement, dust off himself and save the world. And that's what he did for Argentina. He single-handedly took them to a World Cup in 1986. And he almost did it again in 1990 against all the odds. And similarly in the USA. And that's the individual. He took his teams, Napoli, unheralded, never won before.
Right.
Came to the Italian Serie A and took over. And that's the individual. That's why we love him.
I think that's why it's not, you know, nobody can ever say I'm being unfair by saying he's a symbol of world football. And he's somebody that, you know, you don't have to belong to that era or that generation to ever compare him when you talk about the greatest of all times. Because even on our show, when we had the Football 11, the Ultimate Football 11, Diego Maradona was dominating. I mean, I wasn't a part of that show, but I was looking at the team from home. And, you know, Diego Maradona, his name was constantly cropping up in almost all the categories, right?
Yeah,
Lance?
and Brent touched on something very important just now, because when you look at the generation past of world-class players and you begin the conversation of who is the greatest of all time, a lot of the players have been a part of star-studded teams that have been, you know, proliferated with huge iconic players, whereas Maradona with Argentina, as Brent just mentioned, not that the team was a poor team, but he really took the team on his shoulders in 1986 and won them that World Cup. Brent mentioned about Napoli. When he went there, Napoli was among the also-rans, and he won 2 Serie A titles with them and lifted the profile of the team. So I think part of Maradona's legacy, Mariah and Brent, would have to be the way he took his teams by the scruff of the neck and dragged them to super performances, which a lot of the outstanding players over time, and history records, did not have to do that because they had so many high-quality players around them.
Lance, and you say that, and I feel like I get that in his personality as well, because when you listen to the tributes that came in from Messi, or you listen to the things that these players says, you know, apart from lifting his team back then, even when he was alive, you know, up to recently and whatnot, and we all know he was ailing, he had this impact on the players where, you know, even when they were going through personal things, he was able to speak to them in a manner and, of course, lift them as well. So we see him just having such an uplifting personality off and on the field.
Yeah, Brent?
Yeah, it really is. You know, we live in a time where, especially during the 2020 pandemic, where we talk so much about life, because life has really come to a standstill. And as you mentioned, Lance, at the top of the program, this is the new norm. So while during the pandemic, a lot of reflection, there's so much conversation about the greatest of all time, whether it be basketball, whether it be athletics, and of course, certainly in the sport of football. And you just feel that when you talk about the greatest of all time and Maradona, it's a blend of his performances, his imperfection, and what he did. And a lot of what he did it against all odds. I mean, you have to, the fact, of course, that he played with Napoli and of course, with Argentina and took them to championships. And that was his personality as well as off the field. You know, I remember back in the Russia World Cup where he showed up allegedly intoxicated, I think, to one of the games. And it was that famous picture of him in the suites, looking like he was a bit under. But that's Maradona. We all loved it. We understood him. We understood that's the human being. We understood that what he was about, and we loved him for it. And you talked about Neymar, Mariah. Yeah. Neymar couldn't get away with that. He would not get away with that sort of behavior,
right?
Because we judged his imperfection. We did not necessarily judge Maradona's imperfection because we believe that was part and parcel of the individual.
But Lance, you know, the question on my mind now is, how do you pay tribute to somebody of that quality, like naming a stadium after him? Is that even enough?
Well, Argentina will take care of that for sure, because we know how iconic and godlike he's looked at in Argentina. Of course, globally, Maradona is very, very highly respected, but you can leave it to the Argentines to give him his just due, because he is without question. I know, you know, there are many of the younger generation who would put Messi in the same conversation with Maradona, but there are the purists in Argentina who would tell you that it's not even close. And Argentina salutes Maradona as their greatest of all time. Partly, of course, because he brought World Cup success to them, and Messi hasn't been able to do that so far. Yeah, Brent, and the other thing that we want to look at is Maradona's overall contribution to the game, because we know about his playing statistics and his CV as a player. At home before he went overseas with his talent, because Barcelona was in fact the first team he went to play for overseas outside of Argentina, and won a La Liga title with them as well. And then he went to Napoli, won 2 Serie A titles with them. He played with Sevilla, Newell's Old Boys when he went back to Argentina, Boca Juniors as well. But outside of his Serie A titles and his La Liga titles and his Argentina titles, and the number of goals here, you see 115 for juniors, 115 as well for Napoli, 38 goals for Barcelona. There were also some League Cup, there are some cup titles, some knockout titles along the way. But his coaching stint, Brent, failed to live up to the kind of impact that he had as a player. And I guess, you know, his fans would look at his coaching stint as very, very unsuccessful, and his 2010 sojourn as the Argentina coach at the World Cup in South Africa didn't go very well at all, even though he had Messi in his ranks.
I think when you talk about, and first I'll touch as a player, Lance, you know, football evolves probably every 10, 15 years, meaning that the game evolves positionally, tactically, etc. And the evolution that Maradona brought to football was that Makalele position. After the 86 World Cup, many teams realized that Maradona playing in that false 9 position, dropping back in the midfield from the striking position and picking balls up and running at your defense, that they needed someone in front of your back 4. And that, of course, birthed that number 6 position, the Makalele. So he was one of the the reasons why football started to evolve. As it relates to his coaching career, I always felt that the hiring of Maradona was always an inspirational one. I think when you look back at the South Africa World Cup, there was a lot of talk about how he inspired the Argentinian team and how he inspired Lionel Messi. And there was always that concern once you got to the real business end of the World Cup, he would be tactical, he would show up tactically short. And then many times in his coaching career, because he was not tactically astute as a coach, I think that's where he fell short.
Definitely, Brent. Definitely a legend, and of course a sad day for football. Well, many influential football figures across the Caribbean have also been reacting to news of Maradona's death. Let's hear from them.
Diego Armando Maradona, the second greatest player in the world. We mourn his loss today, but he would always be in my heart with the greatest.
Tough year. Another legend has passed up. To many, he is the best the world has ever seen. Even though we want to argue that, we can't argue the impact on the game. And we salute his tremendous contribution that he has made to football, the excitement around football. And yes, he produced a lot of excitement off the pitch, but all that made the persona of Diego.
I join the rest of the global football family to convey my deep condolences to the family of Diego Maradona. I would also like to express my condolences to the Argentine people and to the Argentine Football Federation. Football has lost a great son, and we will carry his memory in our hearts for many years.
Diego Armando Maradona, absolute legend of the sport, larger-than-life character. My fondest Maradona story is the fact that he left a super club like Barcelona to join Napoli at the time, who were just an ordinary Serie A team, and then led them to multiple Serie A titles and a UEFA Cup title, led his national team Argentina again to the World Cup title, playing in a very defensive team, but the modus operandi was just give the Maradona the ball, he will sort out the rest. And you look at that goal against England, the dribble from half line, and also the audacity to try the hand of God and pull it off. He was more than a footballer. He was an entertainer who brought life and joy to the sport, and he'll be sadly missed.
First of all, on behalf of Grenada Football Association, I'd like to extend sympathy to the people of Argentina and the family of the late Diego Maradona on his untimely passing at a gentle age of 60. I think the world will lose one of the better players in the modern game of football.
The St. Vincent and the Grenadines football fraternity is deeply saddened to learn of the passing of the iconic Argentinian football legend Diego Maradona. The Golden Boy, as he was popularly referred to in footballing circles, has inspired multiple generations of footballers with his energetic, classy, and creative ball-playing style. The entertainment value that Diego brought to the viewership of football will be difficult to emulate, as millions of supporters feasted on his performances as a player and ultimately a coach. Diego will definitely be missed on the world stage for his entertainment value, the pride with which he would like to extend our deepest condolences to his immediate family and friends, and would also like to express solidarity with the Argentinian Football Association and the people of Argentina at this time of their loss.
Of course, definitely a sad day in history. And of course, I pray that the friends that are close to Diego Maradona and of course his family find the strength in this time, to get over what they're going through. Lance, I'm going to start with you first. What has been your most memorable, moment watching Diego Maradona? I mean, you've followed him throughout his entire life. Yeah. What would you say has been your most memorable moment? Maybe a goal?
Well, the half-line dribble against England in that quarter-final at the 1986 World Cup, when he took the ball from half-line and just dribbled the entire England back half of their team and then shifted around the goalkeeper and slotted.
People tend to remember everything.
Well, I was at work. I was working at Radio Jamaica at the time, and I was just 2 years into my career as a sports journalist, and I think I watched it in my offices at RJR. It was the World Cup, so it generated a lot of excitement, and we were all busy at the time.
All right, so we're going to go to a short break, and then I look forward, Brent, get those favorite moments in your brain, because we're coming back to you after the break.